Okay, so yeah, Tashi Dele to everyone, and then Tashi Dele to also Angela, and Tashi Dele to DEP Deb,
Tashidele,
Tashi Dele to
Isla.
Rosa, and Tashi Dele to group that is of people in the forest of wisdom. Yeah, Angela, I want to. Can I ask you one thing? Tashi Dele to family.
One moment, we can't hear you quite yet. We're getting the TV going here.
Angela, you do you know
Yeah.
Tibetan?
Does that mean it's low?
No, that just might mean that it's plugged in.
Gesla nga page tosam sheki
Yeah.
There's like two power.
nga page lúc trong jeki Gesla nga page tosam sheki
나 가와이 다시 그냥 야간에 이런 거.
nga page lúc trong jeki Gesla nga page
I should mute myself.
Yeah. So somewhere we good. Everyone can hear well.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's it. And here also DEB depth. Actually, depth. Who is that one? Can you just introduce?
Yes. I met you when you spent the summer in Connecticut.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So Deb, you are from Connecticut, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Deb is short for Deborah.
Okay, Deborah. Thank you. And then good evening here. This unknown. This number 967459. Oh, Mr. John.
How you doing?
John. Okay, good evening, sir. Okay.
We got the two people, that's it?
No, here the group people here. It's forest wisdom. Okay. 대회 고우대.
What?
대회 고우면
Am I home?
no. 대회 unmute. 대회 please you should unmute.
Unmute?
대회 럽선 대회.
No, I'm not. You can't hear?
Hey, yeah. John, I can hear you, but I mean for forest wisdom.
Oh, the book? You want the book?
Yeah, no. I mean, there is an unmute for Forest of Wisdom actually.
Oh,
Right.
where's Forest of Wisdom?
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Oh,
There it is.
Okay.
Geshe-la,
Okay.
would you like us to share the book? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, if possible, now maybe to let in the screen here, if possible.
I have the book.
No. It's in the screen. I mean, computer zoom in the screen.
I
If
think
people
he's asking John to mute.
Mute?
No, last time what I suggest, I mean, what I asked for something, Forest of Wisdom, if they're possible to also here. Display or demonstrate for some Dharma text after when we reading them, then I just ask answer if possible. If not, if able to do, if not, it's okay. I mean text, yeah. Mhm. Okay. So anyway, yeah. Firstly, yeah, nice to Yeah, nice and glad to see you all here, firstly. And then also, Sangmala, good evening, everyone here. And and then okay, and then here now we have here talk about this house the chapter Lamrim Chemu text on of this Samadhi, right? Lamrim Chemu Samadhi text actually which we have read last time. So in this text, um, uh, last time we have stopped here at the beginning of how to be certain about the order, right? Of samadhi and vipassana, right? These two. Yeah. Yeah, we stopped there last time. Actually, yeah, for me, of course, for me, explanation, giving explanation, Tibetan is much more, how to say, not only convenience, but much more, how to say, hello,
Um,
mm,
could we spend, could we have just spend like about 5 minutes dealing with a question, paradox question?
yeah, maybe question we will take later if you don't mind. Just keep in your mind. Then later remind me, please.
It's not going to leave my mind.
Yeah.
It's not going to leave the mind.
You can first you can note down paper and then yeah later please.
No, I have the book.
Sure. 되게 지단 되게 지들이 기주서 말아. 요는 아니 유주서래. Just one second.
Yeah, if you need that, then I can try my best.
되게 기주서는 빼야. 이게 표기나 시작도 나라. 나한테 대신 망하다 세라 야가
So Gena is asking if I can help to translate, so I'll just or interpret. I'll move over closer to the mic, which I think is here. So
양이
he's saying that
대신 야가
digging into the end, he's able to teach more clearly, talk about the text more clearly.
better. Yeah, more better. Yeah, and then I want to ask before that, except Lobsang translator for the wisdom, all other people, can you please put your this Zoom this unmute? Sorry, in the mute. Then later when you question time, and of course unmute you can. Sure, definitely, please. Yeah, for not to get the disturbed sound from your place. Thank you for all of your understanding. 도지체, everyone. 다 당봉 가수 들이 람림 시험보다 대형이 들라이다. 전부도 몰라. 자세히 봐.
It's okay. Yes.
그래서
The 감투 제공은
야, 이게 그냥 우리 쪽 그래. 그냥 우리 쪽 그래. 하고.
Nice.
그래서 저는 냐마 jun요라 냠뇨요. 집에졌다. 대신고 그래. 냐마 기줄 먹고 챙겨라. 아니, 왜 낭다에 맞는데. 예 하고. 야, 저런 기줄 체제 네바요 예 하고. I has the ability to translate well. I 다 다양한서 람린 시모 어디라 하자. 이내다 타동외와 니 시고라 람리. 디니 데 롭스 믹스기 람린 시모 와기. 신의 타동이디 지다 제널 람린 시모 고네 슈보다 상마 계침부래. 이는 믹스 particularly especially 신의 타동이디 믹스기 계침부래. 이 낭론 에몽
So this section that we're in now in the Great Treatise on the Stages for the Path to Enlightenment, which covers the practice of shamatha or in English, serenity, as well as vipassana or insight, are especially important for practice. So even though the entirety of the Lamrim Chenmo, the great treatise from the very first page until the last, is extremely important, this section here on shamatha and vipassana is especially valuable and important for us.
그래. 다디 수신의 활동이지 오래서 전부터 시작했구나. 지다 남는 시험부터 지나 중교지 조비지 조 그래서 대바시기 남자 되시. 상계 중계 좋아요. 대바시기 남자 동거래. 대바시와 선점들이 상계 위주로 쇼고 당부 가서 대바시기 남자 동거. 동안 대바 문주 대바 거기에 남세 대바시기 남자 동거래. 뒤에 남는 시험부터 대바시기 남자 동거. 다다가도 시대에 대바시기 남자 동거래.
So the main topic of the entire text, the Lamrim Chenmo, is the Four Truths. And the Four Truths are what the Buddha taught after his awakening. That was what's taught in what's called the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And there the Buddha taught true suffering, true origin, true cessation, and true paths. And so when we're looking at the Lamrim Chenmo, and this section on shamatha and vipassana, then the main topic is the Four Truths. That's what we have to be talking about.
도대체 하디니 때나 정부 덴바실을 삼았다 봐이나 때봐이나 덴바실을 때봐이나 동아 덴바 고주 덴바 와 동아도 방자 이체 고대 랑제 랑자체 법자체 아 다디 수카지라서 무슨 삼모 동아 되고 동아 되는 매래 동아 잘돼 동아 도트 아 참말로 동아를 탈퇴로 얘기하는 모두 나 동아 되고도 생이 수지예요 말 나라 땅이 고 생이 수지예요 말 이제가 동아 되고요 말 이제 미디어 동아 테레 하르비 치도 얼왜 치도 동아 되게라 저발라 동아 되 무지 동아 무지마도나 하마고나 동아를 탈퇴로 연애 동아를 제일 두고 말 이제가 동아를 동아 주 ting이 뭐지 상주들이 가지고 못해나 봐 나사도 무슨 나사디 스칸 나사 저발라 나사 수부 내가 너 저발라 뭐 암지기 나사도 무엇이고 소소원이 또 암지를 끼지 되면은 또 아니 나사 가려도 동아 슐리도 나사를 가려도 뒤주 가려도 뭐 되게 그건 내가 지키지야 이런 신기 이게 동아 되면 부주된 관계도 모두 쉬운 게 상마 동아를 탈퇴다 전도의 간장 있어 이 모두나
And when we divide up the Four Truths into two pairs, then the first two of true suffering and true origin, those are what we call the things to be abandoned or that we reject. And the next two, the true cessations and true paths, that's what's to be adopted or practiced. And so the reason for learning about this is, well, none of us actually wish to suffer. So the first truth, the true suffering, none of us wish to suffer. We all have a desire to be freed from suffering. We all have a desire to escape suffering. And just like someone who is sick, and first we have to identify what is the illness. We have to be able to diagnose the illness and then see what causes it. So likewise, we have the first two truths, true suffering and true origin. So we have to identify what suffering is, or else we won't, even if we want to be freed of it, we won't be able to free ourselves from it if we don't know how to identify it. So the first step is to understand suffering and to know how to identify it.
Yeah, first to understand the truth of suffering and origin of suffering, these two.
Origin.
Get free from, to liberate. This is it. 니버디 고된다 람디인데 가능스나 정말 니기 되는 게 아니야. 니기 되고 그래. 정말로 기분 니기 되고 그래. 헬도 템포러리 니기 그거래. 롱러스 니기. 나중에 니기 가리네. 니기 최종 가리네. 정말로 그거래. 니기 자체부 추유. 내가 또 가리네 세디다 겨치마다 산이링이 되고 상황 산이 되고 난이 되고 신이고 이게 체중 가리네 내가 기부 체중 가리네 아주 상황을 보고 대인주가나 대인 대인주 니기 법에 그거 대인주 제 법에서 거기에서는 니기래 타주시나 니기 못하시고 내가 또 타도 니가 되 때도 되는 니기로 거기에 타버디 때도 되는 니기다 또뭐는 long lasting 근데 람데 세디 그 탑이 탑 메터 means 디인지 디인이 어디 저기죠 디기 법에 탑수
And then, and Geshe also said in the previous statements about the first two truths that no one wants suffering, and just likewise, no one asks to have more problems. No one asks to have more suffering. So likewise, what do we want is happiness. So then we have the next truth of the truth of cessation. So when we say the truth of cessation, what we mean is happiness. And we all want happiness, but not just any happiness. We want all forms of happiness, any happiness possible, no matter how big or small. We like small happiness, we like big happiness, we like happiness today, we want happiness tomorrow, we want happiness the next day. We also want temporary happiness as well as ultimate lasting happiness. So when we say true cessation, that's happiness, but not just any happiness, it is stable, lasting happiness or permanent happiness. So that's what true cessation means. And then true paths is the method to attain that kind of happiness. So then we also we must then identify the true cessations and true paths, and that's the purpose of being introduced to them.
오케이 도지체 디인주가나 다 동알 미드비 동알 빵제 동알 덴바다 지 군중이 부디 견주가 뱃 내버 쓰바라 내가 타도 니가 때도 내버 쓰바라 신의劳动 过程 디직체 디네시 디기 내가 또 타도 니가 내가 부디 디기 타도 디기 니가 때도 영어 말하냐 신의劳动을 맨날 내다 디인이 신의劳动이 남을 시험을 대신 니세 개체모 유지 가서 방저 누구니 돼야 때도 내버 쓰바라 신의劳动 내바라 방저 동화되면 구주되면 때도 내버 쓰 말해 랑자 없자 고대다 람데니 싫어 랑자 디기 때도 되는 디기 쳐봐 쳐봐라야 신의다 하고도 내봐라 용토 말 진짜가 손이가 돼 내버시 냠레티 타지 뭐 쳐봐라 신의를 하고도 맨날 메타 대송가 신의를 하고도 이 미세 개체모 유지 못해 냠레라는 미세 개체부지 유지지 세우셔서
So then the first two truths, which are what are to be abandoned and done away with, to actually fully remove them, to fully make them non-existent or destroy them, then and meaning not just temporarily, but also ultimately completely make them non-existent, we actually need this practice of shamatha as well as vipassana. Likewise, to achieve the full and permanent happiness, we need to rely on the practices of shamatha and vipassana. So that's the reason for why, because the Four Noble Truths are the main topic of this text, and the method to achieve them is, the method to abandon the first two, suffering and origin, as well as achieve the last two, cessation and paths, is serenity or shamatha and insight or vipassana. That's why they are so important.
Okay, I hope it's clear. Yeah, everybody in your mind understand it. 这些，他心里的好多谜题，给全部引发起来，是吧？这个是给全部起。他听你的苦人，听这个了，很多单个，心里好多我们用人，很多我是三些开始多少了，开始那么就不吃了，心里好多我们用人，开始咱们我得用人起不起的，我们用人起不起，应该起起。他心里好多你的开全部一呢，你把过过呢？ 그녀가 고릴이라 오늘 응원도 가르쳐 보래. 이제라 가르쳐 보래. 의미셔도. 이 그래서 또 드린 것도 사실 될 일이다. 가서 좀 비치래. 신의들 하더니 내 당부 신행이는 top. 신의 곰 염려신의 신행이는 top. 신의 톱스는 이제는 아니 방동을 해. 방동 내라. 신의 매발 하동 고면 하동 또 기초 말 세대 당골 말로 지는 이거 줘요 윤지 세대 당배 윤지 보다 세대 당배 윤지 봐도 걸 세대 이배 윤지 더배 요 말아 세대 이배 그 노래 쓰다 온진다 그래 이제 하동의 신의를 때는 더 하동 이거를 통보를 공부 또 다시 고림고 나가지 이 신랑이 고림도念了신의를 이제 하고 우리 드린 사지 닝규지
So then we had looked through the first parts of the text, the volume 3 of the Great Treatise, where there were many headings in the outline. And one of those headings, the last one we covered, was the necessity or the purpose of practicing shamatha and vipassana. And that's what was just talked about. So then the next one that's coming up is the order of practicing these two, because when we know that they're absolutely necessary to practice and we can't do without them, then we have to check and see, well, what is the order for practicing them? Which one comes first? So when we look at the order, then it's shamatha that comes first before vipassana. Vipassana is done in dependence on shamatha. So without having the basis of shamatha, then we know, even if we try to meditate on vipassana, we won't be able to achieve it or practice it properly. So this is why, and when we look at the order, then the order is first shamatha, and then vipassana can be generated on that basis. And that's the kind of the essential point of the next section of text that is coming now.
말한도 상관은 신이 이제 고르면서 당부 신이에서 이제 소화를 하나 띵이시로 띵이시 이거 지부지 말에 할수라 띵이지는 들다 띵이지가 더 라파 셈네 세지기 더 셈이라 세지고 다른 이게 유미발은 셈 유베 칼라 세지도 네트리는 라와지 법나 이틀 신이에서 신에게 지어라 모든 상당한수 수수 체가 이거 까마주디 내내 대통도 그래서 미고 쇼도 얘네들은情况里 얘네들은 고발이 남이 얘네들 남이 세디 인도래 얘네들은 이 부신 뭐도 딱하고 뒤니 신에다 활동 보다情况도 고바情况도 고바니 강이 매버서다 알지 매버라 생내바나 까마주 정아 니슈 쟁아 숨주네 선에 쇼를 더디니 통도 이나야 이 그래서나 내가 심지어 라고 하는 거지. 라고 말하는 거. 지기래 이니들은 중앙도 고반이 되어라 무슨 삼르나 중앙도 고반이 되잖아. 다 공기 양 용다르게 톤 트레이닝 톤은 베즈 에포트 톤이 그리고 냐면 쳐봐야나 심지어 뭐 공자봐야나 정보 가망나 대주에라고 그러니까 뭐주 라고 라고 그러니까 뭐주가 대주에 이거도 그러니까 뭐 이슈 이런 식으로 제가 이런 식으로 지도 누구 공제 관리 채워나 중앙다 고반이 뉴로와 슈충슈 뉴뉴 슈충슈 뉴뉴뉴 관리를 중앙다 고반이 내가 차수나 제수나 발전소 되니래 진행이 발전소가 군이 나오면 차수나 아가도 신이 없어 아니 샘시도 네트웨 라운 탑다 라운 다시부터 더 배워 말다 샘시도 네를 라운 중앙도 고반이 됐어 봐 이틀 신장기 대화스 말도 뭐가 신도 장바도 신도 means extremely 장바 means 다 들리기 센지 분이라 라운 미버 지시도 네라 수술한 하자 라운 와 강인데 알지네 근데 신도 장 뭐 되는지가 삼들렸나 아니 신장 터봤어 신이에서 도지라 이 매주치나 내가 제요 지도 내가 그 배세고 준비고 정달고 다 어디 좀 비워 다게 지소집에서는 졸라듯이 산지 두고 쇼고 어제는 산지 되면 네가 유스 산지 되면 네가 해도 신을 되면 네가 더 산지 고바도 신이잖아 나 신이 와와 그래 어떻게 돼
So the earlier segment, Geshe-la said one thing which I forgot to say, which is about the stages or order. So just like in school, when we want to, before we gain the knowledge that you can get by going to second grade, first you have to gain the knowledge from studying in first grade. So just like that, first you need shamatha and then vipassana. And so now looking at the meaning of shamatha, it's a type of freedom of concentration, a freedom over your ability to concentrate. That's the kind of nature of shamatha. So concentration here means the ability to stay focused single pointedly on a single focal object. And when you have shamatha, it means that you can do that for as much as you wish. So right now, we don't really even have the ability to stay for 10 whole minutes on a single object without one of two things happening. Either laxity will arise or excitement will arise. So laxity arising means that we get drowsy or sleepy, fall asleep. And then excitement means that the mind wanders off or shoots off to some external thing other than the object of the meditation. So we need to develop this through training. There's a capacity to concentrate single pointedly through training and through effort. It takes effort to do this training. And if we put the effort in, then slowly we'll develop new capacity. So we'll develop the capacity to stay focused on our focal object for 5 minutes. And then we'll be able to develop the capacity to stay on the focal object for 10 minutes, and then 15 minutes, and then 20 minutes. And slowly we'll increase our capacity to stay focused on the focal object without these two flaws of laxity and excitement arising. Those are the two main obstacles to having perfect concentration or single pointedness. So as soon, when we're free of those two, laxity and excitement, then that's the attainment of shamatha or serenity. And so and then at that point, we also have something which we call pliancy, the bliss of pliancy. So pliancy, the Geshe-la, using the Tibetan term, explained there's two parts of the word, Shintu Jangwa, which we combine into a word, the term used as Xinjiang, and then when you take it apart, it's Shintu Jangwa. And so Shintu means extremely, extraordinarily. It's what's the word? Something that makes it, it means it's a superlative. Yeah, it's a superlative that means that. So there's superlative plus the word Jangwa, which means in this case having freedom of concentration or freedom to stay single pointedly. So it's having this extraordinary freedom of mind. Now it doesn't mean that you're completely free like an arhat or a foe destroyer, which would mean free from samsara altogether. But you have freedom to stay single pointedly on a given object that you choose. That's what's meant here by freedom or control. You could just say control over your concentration. So then we always recite the refuge prayer. Most of you will know. So we say, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. So of course, if we accept that we have this capacity to become a Buddha, well, then of course we also have the capacity to achieve this state of shamatha, because the Buddha is an even higher attainment and shamatha is an earlier or lesser attainment. So of course we have the ability to do this through training and through effort. When we really, persevere and put in the work, then we can achieve this.
So, 맞아.有木的，我就sama 동화 sama 규칙라 니마지로 동화 sama 세트 거야. 동화들도 rim바지는 칼리칼리 세우라. 방자스니도 칼리칼리 전부도 part 세우라. 근데 방지 유무디냐 그래서 방지 그래서 보다 동화기 유무디냐 칼리칼리 세우라. 림베지 세우라. 그래서 맞아. 전부도 뭐지? 지그 니즈 성방 这个帮你帮什么不懂嘛？上面这批了，要是做嘛啦？这个是上面没好，第一个了，这边呢，他们心里头把的做开始呢，牛木哪里做开始，青蛙都搞不进来，这个牛木蒙古然后是了啊，这就还不嘞，牛木蒙古有的牛木哪里，青蛙都搞不进的才是呢，心里头的过了，青蛙都搞不进来，心里娘们的。 가서 한두번서나 챌린지 딜이 쪼가는 방제 봐 지원도 고반이 지원이 유머래 고바디 유머래 제대로 하고 가 고바디 유머래 심지어 가지고 인유를 하고요 선유도 인유시는 지원도 고반이 인유나 그래 봐디 플렉시 이모션 야 고바디 인유가라 인유의 방제 인유래 고바디 좀 여자다 那写上的就招的有这样的节目写，有这样的详细写，有这样的节目详细写，我怎么说？有这样的节目穷写。근데 청와대 지난 유무신有的几个有人做的말이 배详细写，말이 배详细写，详细写。第一面外那当时，第一面外社会那个东西，哪个怎么说呢？我怎么说？东西哪个那人的社会了，都不能说，好对吧？那怎么定的其实？
Ready, Ganasa?
수부 나서 빼는 미시 수부 나서 오 나서 내 링기 세고 와네 수부 되나 요 어디는
Then we, just like our ability to achieve Buddhahood, achieve shamatha, we have the ability to be free of suffering, and the other objects to be abandoned, the things to be abandoned. We have the capacity to do so, but over time, gradually. It's not like we can remove or abandon all suffering just instantly, just like that, but step by step. And just like we can remove suffering, we can also remove or abandon the cause of suffering, which is afflictions. The afflictions are another thing to be abandoned. And so there are many types of afflictions, and we can abandon them, one by one or piece by piece. And the main ones that we must abandon in the practice of shamatha or to achieve shamatha are these two of laxity and excitement. So laxity and excitement, if once they're abandoned, then we've achieved shamatha. And likewise, the practice of practicing shamatha is working to overcome these two of laxity and excitement. And so when we look at the different categories of afflictions, we can divide them into two basic baskets, which are the categories of the root afflictions and secondary afflictions. So these two, excitement and laxity and excitement, are both secondary afflictions. Excitement here is part of the root affliction of attachment. It primarily arises in dependence on attachment, and we could say it's actually like a part of the category of attachment. Likewise, or in distinction to that, then the laxity is part of the root affliction of ignorance. So laxity is kind of part of or an aspect of ignorance, and excitement is an aspect of attachment. And just like with our physical illnesses, if we rely on the proper medical treatment, then gradually we can heal and be free of the illness. So likewise, we can gradually overcome these afflictions and abandon them.
대인 저거라 중화도 고반이 지금 님보셔가 님보 간데 내가 저거스나 신에게 빠져서 갈 중화도 고반이다 제라서 나타나 갑자기 무시 감스다 엔시로아 자리 빠져서 뒤에 중화도 고반이다 제가 님보 쪽할서 갈 님보 갈 무시 갈 템바다 시시 템바다 시시니 봐 템바다 시시니야 관의 수수 생활은 중화도 고반이리 나 신도하자 So,
now we talk about an antidote. So just like for healing an illness, we use medicines or antidotes. So there's an antidote or antidotes to these two afflictions of laxity and excitement. And what are the main antidotes? They are mindfulness and meta-awareness. Or I think translation we're using uses it doesn't use meta-awareness, but it's something slightly different. Introspection. Introspection. Yes. So mindfulness and introspection. Thank you. So those are the two main ones that when we practice them, then our laxity and excitement will decrease.
최근에 고바이와 제가 뒤주는 고바다 중원이들 이체 봐 막 숙충수 합대자에서 엔지도 템바디기 치와도 고반이 이체 아니 템바디라 다 따도 칭이디 시신스가 오 티인지 그렇군요. 뭐지? 티인이 폰에 아니 치와도 고반이 쇼다 유미발라 템베기 송 템바디 쇼도면도 템바디 땅다 쇼도 데미도 스타블로 데도면도 시신 잘하지 잡로라 시신 시스터 뭔지 디인지 어디지 시신이 돈에 템발라 송접시 따도시 템베기 레갈 카레 미바 유미발라 미베 세드 미바가 세드 니아바시 이 세드 니아바디도 윤종다 간지리 맞아 간지리 윤종 되면은 아니 중화도 고반이 랑슈이 맞아 다 템바디 세부 템바디 양보 주나 셰랍다 템바디 디게 랑슈이 템발로 로보 콜라 템베 콜도 셰랍다 이게 강가 예봐 띵이즈도요 dim바도 메바 템바디도 고라 예봐라 소디 무스트 템바
And to directly counteract and to contend with these afflictions of laxity and excitement, then we use mindfulness. We practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is what really allows, has the function to keep the mind on the object that we choose, and that counteracts and battles with this laxity and excitement. Then in the background, that's where introspection is acting like an inspector and also a guardian in a sense of the mindfulness. So it's checking up on the quality of your mindfulness. So mindfulness holds your mind to the object that you choose, while in the background, introspection is checking on the mindfulness to see if it's doing its job. And so that's how it functions to act as an antidote. So then we, again, once we develop the mindfulness stronger and stronger, then laxity and excitement will decrease and eventually be removed. So then when we talk about mindfulness as the practice here, or as a mental factor that we're practicing, there are also other mental factors that are present together with it. It's just that mindfulness is the primary one that we're really cultivating. So that's why it's brought out as, taught in this context as the main antidote. But together with that mindfulness, there's also wisdom and wisdom or intelligence. There's also and the mental
dimba
Dumba. So there's also a mental factor of aspiration, as well as a mental factor of interest, as well as a mental factor of concentration itself. So those are all present together when mindfulness is being practiced, but the main one that we focus on is the mindfulness.
그나 조공아 좋아 라바 예배 내가 조공 님도 내가 쉬우라 앞에는 그냥 뉴구지 이 특이나 뉴구지 벤지 이 특이나 벤디 소 조구디 있으라 제 조구디 특이래 되게 특수니 스미드 조구디 있으라 참다리 있으라 이네 두 이거 조구 제가 성디기 누구 스미어 말이냐 이니가 조시다 주자고 사버 거다 이래서 좀 조구 텔레가지 예 이것도 되게 돼 아주 냠뇨스이다 지난 이 맨날 살았다가 냠도 그래 이라 신나비기 저 냠도 냠도 맨나야 콜 서포팅 당고 차견 당고 이도 누구가 내가 지금 이거 되죠
So that to just give a common sense sort of everyday example of how the different mental factors function as a team, then we could just think about holding like a paintbrush or a pen with your hand, where you're holding the brush mainly with your pointer, your index, and your thumb, and those are what are directly gripping the instrument, but your other fingers are also acting as support. So they're there together as part of one team. They're working together. So if you wouldn't be able to have the dexterity and the full function of writing or painting without all the fingers of the hand.
Oh, this is that teamwork. Football team or basketball team, like teamwork here. In our mind, there are also many other teams. Even them, but reality. 야야, 야야. 아디시디 가서 대신 다 잡로도 어디 데이터 없이라. 디치체. 아 신이다 하우도니 고래이 마시바. 자기 대신 먹으러 제일 많이 봐. 현줄라 말리기리 안디시. 접수와. 이제 접수와. 아 신이다 하우도니 고래이 마시. 고래이 마시. 그래서 가서 내세에서 뉴바스보다 난 삼류도 뉴바. 내세기 뉴바. 뉴무 매고스가. 셈 뉴무 때도 매고스가. 난 삼류 시비 뉴도 그리고 삼류는 뉴도 가지고 그래서 subject like 이치도 봐. 그리고 mental subject 뉴바 가서 신의 하고 있지. 이니 봐시. 네. 뉴무 때도 매고스가 디기 때도 야고 그랬어. 보니고에 이 봐시. 아 디가 난 삼류 뉴바 디가라. 요가 디 치트게 된거 말. 디가 난 삼류 뉴바처럼 냠도라. 니빠게 계속 주래. 니빠. 유 삼류 뉴바 디기 유미 게야. pena 드링에 디스랍스나 pena 신일 하고 토바가 디 계시 부지 삼륜디도 디가 신일 하고 토바 디카라 디 미빠들라 pena 미다베라시 라 미빠시다 유 셰고 네시 셰고이 신이 미빠 셰고 원리 reality 네죠 reality 셰고 수트 셰고라 미다베라시 미다바 셰든지 시시끼리 교화도 电力调节让心，电力对路给让心，是吧？电力就让心，아니打破电不灭，继续给你调节让心，아니米上来让心，东来让心，东巴打灭让心，所以老大没打，东啊打灭嘛，这些话松顶说，你就听了，松也三个兄弟这个说的，听了你说嘛，我也你就reality了，哎呀。这些东西没打破所以是最低最多，没打破来多少东西呢？而且是最低吧呢，能把买一把菜里最低吧呢，确实，我要是同学是确实的，这药都要讲讲了，这药都要说还是有点研究，就研究往这药，对住别人心吧，那弄啊别人心吧，啊你东关你别人心吧，是吧？大美别人心。你是对象，第一句话了，我听说你是我们这个县，现在的好多特别如果提的，你是我们的，我比你是让谁看不？我比你录了咋个？意思说呢？别讲那我比你录了啥？我比让谁？我说我就是出了个，出or for 出，是吧？出这个两把手了，我比你是，我的第一句，第哪里？你代表人心，另外人心，连这个，这就别个人心，别开心不的。我呢，就讲我跟你说，所以三个兄弟这个说了嘛，全是我跟你说的。你上嘛几个，你上几个面的，上嘛你上几个可以，你上十九几个，你做这个过程嘛，给我来讲，三个兄弟这个我跟你说讲，谁是天呢？刚刚说了送了，全是打了做这个，第一句，你别开心不的，第二句。没打东啊打呗，先过去，你老多头发特别好。其他的这个男的你写的，这个我跟你说这个男的，我跟你说这个男的，他妈说的差不多东北你们那些南北问题，太写完了，南北问题写完了，全部人都连这个南下，连这个南你是，是吧？你看啥？东岸问题是。没大问题，就定义了写，定问题。你说这个写了，你电视剧组问题是写，别开心。我觉得都问题。
So then we are talking about these two practices, shamatha vipassana, and then it's important to understand what is the focus of these two. So these two are subjects, right? These two are consciousnness, their aspect, or they are instances of consciousness, so they are subjects, and we practice them internally as our own consciousness. But what is it that they are looking at, or what is their focus? So the focal object should be some aspect of reality. So again, we have the purpose of these practicing these two is to completely and permanently remove the truth of suffering and the truth of the origin, as well as to achieve happiness, which is the truth of cessation, the truth of path. So to do that, we need to focus on certain aspects of reality. So when we say truths, like the four truths, well, what is a truth? It's something that's the situation of reality, the situation of things. So what type of situation of things? Well, for instance, there's the nature of impermanence. So all phenomena being impermanent, changing moment by moment. And likewise, the truth or the nature of suffering. Likewise, the nature of being empty, and the nature of selflessness, and the nature of impurity. And then there's the nature of the cause and effect nature of activity or action, karma and its results. So all these things are things those are what are the focus of shamatha and vipassana that allow us to, or that when we, that those are aspects of reality, those natures. So it's just true, right? When we look at things like things are produced and then having been produced, disintegrate. So there's the momentary change of things. That's just part of reality. That's the nature of things. And suffering is a nature of things, and selflessness. And we talk about the three characteristics: the impermanence, impermanence, suffering, and selflessness. So knowing these, so these are all what are the focal objects. All these different aspects of reality are the focal objects of shamatha and vipassana. Again, the gorimchi suyin the gorim the tambo dunya shebala tambo legume de shebala.
알레 모자에 디인지 준전되기 니엘라 미다고 니수 단 가서 들라 먼저 먹으라 따와까다기 찾아시 돈시나데 야 대신 미다 주도요 하고라 이제 주도 근데 누가 방을 고림이가 하나를 잡아야지 고림이 좀 이제 가능성은 하나지 라바라고 니엘시 라베니스 니즈라고 되기 싫어 아니 그 거리 라바라고 또 어디 차워도 또 튕기시 오 너무 하나를 키웠어
When the Buddha taught these topics, he used basically lists of things and explained them in a certain order, right? So these give us sort of a way to understand the order of them in relation to how subtle they are. In other words, the first one. So, for instance, there's the four seals, what we call the philosophical four seals of Buddhism, which is that all compounded phenomena are impermanent, all tainted phenomena are suffering, all phenomena are selfless and empty, and nirvana is peace. Or, for instance, we look at just the four truths themselves, and they each have four attributes. So there are 16 attributes of the four truths. So likewise, those are also taught in an order going from the sort of coarser or easier to understand, like starting with impermanence, and then suffering, and then selfless, and then empty, and it goes progressively subtler.
이 상계 좀 되는데 가자 어떤 거 찾아도 봐. 좀 되지. 합계를 두지지 않을까? 합계 두지의 요래. 두지의 세월, 인지, 세월. 두지. 합계우리 시계를 비상. 그래서 합계의 세월아, 먼저 무슨 by skillful, by means of skill. 합계부디 시계를 봐. 시계부터는 합계우리가 시계를 쓰는데가. 이거는 또 좀 된지 낭비슈도 시키는 거 도다나 동안이 송다 도 낭로라냐 이게 대바치기 남시 송다 송다 뭐주시다 대바치 낭로는 동안 대발에 잘하지 야 군주제 먹으리 시비가 낭로에 잘하지 야 고대 남자들의 낭로에 잘하지 좀 된지 탐기 도시지 이거 잘하게 해봐 레디 이송아 근데 라벨로 아메리카 웨스턴 게 라벨 English subject in it. science subject and melon is from lobsing, Sida Tamuni was so much to conduct. Tara Tony, special lobsing. Who will help? Ryan. Lobsing Tara. Abu Ramana. It's in a Kali, Tara. Things of Jatches, things of Jatches. Teenage in Nampi shooting up. But Tara, what to Chivekala. Tara upon any things of Jatches. The one Nika opportunity. Dependent from the Nitangilas Dijimita Chudare, in a shigi, Sutashi, Sedama, though there was Simsama, Tawatara, was the Dukes. Didn't she, Hasa, tell what she said, I would the Bashi Namsha. The Bashi Namsha, Tella, Nangola, and Hasa, Nindu, a one member, Nindu the Ranje, Hawura, the Nindu the Ranje. And the Yelan Tawachi Butiga, the machine of the Yulani, Tawachi Butina. The same year, Pazzi to Satina. And the Yela Anina, Nalaya, Yajuji, Tara, Nanolaya Tara. Stop. So the solution is the target to Gombulu to Yashilo target to you. The look of a target to Jaja. Hangsa, the other selling Glovian, Stiputia. No, this is us.
And the Buddha, really, the Bhagavan Buddha really was quite an expert in the teaching methodology. So we say the Buddha was an expert in teaching methods, but also had great compassion. So, of course, great compassion, that's an aspect of his mind, that's the compassionate aspect. But then the expert in teaching methodology is wisdom aspect of the Buddha's wisdom. So how do we know that he had this? Well, because he really taught things in a sensible way that goes from more basic and simple to more and more difficult or subtle in the way he presented things. So just like was mentioned, there's the 16 attributes of the Four Noble Truths that are like this, that go from kind of a rougher, simpler explanation to subtler and subtler one, or subtler facets of reality. And it's just like how we set up the modern education system. So any education that we get in the West, or these days anywhere in the world, then you start from first grade, whether it's you're looking at English, whether you're looking at math and science, the lessons start in a very simple, basic way when you're in first grade. And as you go up through your education, then you get into more and more complex or subtle topics. It's the same with how the Buddha taught. So this is like with the 16 attributes of the Four Noble Truths. It's also like this when we just look in general at the broadest kind of division of the Buddhist teachings into Sutra and Tantra, and going into each of them. So within Sutra, he taught things this way, going from more and more basic to more subtle or more complex. So he taught, the four different Buddhist philosophical paradigms, which start off more basic or simple and go into a more complex philosophical view. And same with when we talk about the greater vehicle and the lesser vehicle, or the Mahayana, Hinayana, it's similarly kind of laid out, going from easier to harder subjects, or hard, just harder explanations of these topics. So so that's a sign of the Buddha's great wisdom and his skills and methodology of teaching. And just like him, also Nagarjuna, he also had extremely kind of a really impressive, amazing skill in explaining the teachings and his teaching method. And all the great the scholars who are the authors of the great treatises are like this. And then within Tantra, it's also like that. Within Tantric teaching. So also they start off simpler and with a kind of coarser way of looking at things, and go into subtler way of seeing things, or understanding.
Understanding. Some list this Sunday over time you listen. Love it. Sunday over time you listen.
Oh, so Yeah, when you really go into the
자주세바 장심하고 싸도면서 너로 엘레스야 두고.
So when you go into the tantric explanation and the really, really subtle one, if you really are able to kind of follow that kind of explanation, then you're already close to Buddhahood.
야, so okay, that did it. That's that did it. Now we should do that. Okay, that did the thing is the also 지난 것도 지켜라. 계속은 대화 여다시 봐. 나도 그 방린 다 이거 오르로 시기와 진행 하고니 다 오르로 들려라들이 아주 들인소 참디 될려라. 시라니 고린나라. 이 짓은 오르로라 바이 오르. 이제 고리티 동아에서 상관을 고립니다. 랑바니 소니야. 랑바니 소니야. 타로 띵사브 자체로 저도 싫어. 추도 막 야수 추다 알아. 스밍부 깨지는 추초칼 소탈라 당부 지금 뭐 요말 추 지가 뭐 가고 팀 리그라. 추 당부 마 시를 미시를 두고 당부 가비 추 팀 리그 마. 이제 마마마 지금 마마마 팀도라. 소칼 기 엔팅 링 엔디야지 피델레 기억이 있어요. 스밍부시다. 스위머 스밍기. 엔추디 피리아 엔팅 삽사 아니 계획이 신경 봐. 그래서 주주종한테는 기억이 해봤어요.
So this is just a generally, again, we're talking about this facet of the way that the Buddha taught, because this section that we're starting in the text is about the order of practicing these two shamatha and vipassana. So, but this is really just a general aspect of how the Buddha taught everything. He taught things in this progressive manner. And it's really similar, again, using a simple everyday example, just like we go into a swimming pool or go into the ocean or lake. It starts off very shallow, and as you walk further and further, then it will the water starts to, go deeper and deeper, and eventually it'll reach up to your neck, and eventually you're completely submerged in the water. And that when you get to the middle of the lake or the pool. So it's like that with the Buddhist teaching also.
하다는 좀 맛이 로게 이제는 구름이
So now we'll read through the text a bit.
subsidy. 당연히 당연히 대신 방수 잡서서 한 제디 대신이 고도지 아무 레벨은 지금 좀 뭐라 subject 봐 남들 닝듀셔라 닝듀 현상은 나중에 로바는 알아서 고수를 티 삼년마다 뭐 마스 대신에는로 알아서 마사요와 그래서 대신 잡서 디글레스나 딜러스 주글랑이 그래서 닝듀 대신 잡서 그래서 안다 주글 디 레서 주 안디 로바는 곧 단기 신식 단기 알아서 이게 줄로디가로 고치여를
Oh, so first we gave that introduction to kind of get the main point of this next coming section. This section E, how to be certain about their order. So then when we read through it, everyone will be able to understand it more easily, what Tsongkhapa is getting at.
that's a low
Screen somehow.
대로기면서 로
Oh, so who wants to read today?
되게 대로나야 뭐 아직
Oh, that's again console low.
야
Someone these days low. Maybe also dunsen 시제나.
카시야 미카시야 밀로 세낭지도 자 가지가 오나 오디 이나 카시
So I
카시
guess no one
뭔데요
has to read, but if you are not nervous and you feel like if you feel comfortable, then you can
Yeah.
keep going.
and then today maybe Rosa and Melissa and also and others who didn't read before in the past, if they like to also read today, please welcome join and unmute your device.
I don't need this laptop.
If not by Rosa, if Rosa or Melissa iPhone maybe today not ready to read today, then okay, others someone can read and then you can read also later next time, no problem. So anyway, please feel free, everyone, please feel free. So I forgot it. Angela and Deb. Also, if you want to read today, please, yeah, welcome to read.
Then at least we'll start here just to get it going, okay?
Yeah.
I'll just read the, oh, hello, by the way. I'll just read the very beginning, up until reply on 24, just to get us started. So for section E, how to be certain about their order. Shantideva's engaging in the bodhisattva deeds says, insight possessed of serenity destroys the afflictions. Knowing this, seek serenity at the outset. According to this statement, you first achieve meditative serenity and then cultivate insight on that basis. Calm. Kamala Shila's first stages of meditation says, its object of meditation is indeterminate, meaning that the object of meditation of meditative serenity is indeterminate. As explained above, the object of meditation of serenity may be either reality itself or a conventional phenomenon possessed of reality. If you first understand the meaning of selflessness and then meditate while focusing on this, it should be enough to simultaneously produce both the serenity of an undistracted mind and insight focused on emptiness. Why then is it said that you first seek serenity and then cultivate insight?
Thank you, Elise.
You're welcome.
Shall we keep going? Shall we keep reading?
Yeah.
Reply. The way in which serenity precedes insight is as follows. You do not need to have serenity already in order to develop an understanding of the view that knows that there is no self. For we see that even those who lack serenity develop this view. Nor do you need to have serenity already in order to experience mental transformation in regard to the view. For nothing precludes mental transformation being brought on by the practice of repeated analysis with discerning wisdom, even in the absence of serenity. If you claim that the absence of serenity precludes mental transformation in regard to the view, then the very same reasoning forces you to the extremely absurd conclusion that serenity is required even to experience mental transformation when meditating on impermanence, the faults of cyclic existence, or the spirit of enlightenment. So why is serenity required for insight? According to the Sutra Unraveling the Intended Meaning, as long as the practice of discrimination and special discrimination with discerning wisdom cannot generate physical and mental pliancy, it constitutes a type of attention which approximates insight. When it generates pliancy, then it is insight. Thus, if you have no attained serenity, then no matter how much analytical meditation you do with discerning wisdom, in the end you will not be able to generate the delight and bliss of physical and mental pliancy. Once you have attained meditative serenity, then even the analytical meditation of discerning wisdom will culminate in pliancy. Hence, insight requires meditative serenity as a cause. This will be explained below.
It's funny, you know, it needs to be so there's a typo.
Yeah, that was a good catch.
This ignore 중중지도. Pese 그러면 like ignore 중중지도. 이게 나와요.
Yeah.
Two like 체결지도. I'm sorry, I'm just joking. I'm just pointing out that there was the word "to" is left out in one of those sentences.
It's in the book.
Oh, okay. That's all. Who's next? Maybe someone online?
He did it. 대답이나 나 주가 갈렸으나 그래서 똑똑지라 선지는 주가 갈렸으나 상 신인무도 맞게발 사동 게임이다. 이는 신인무도 맞게발라 사동 게임이나 어느 신인무도 맞게발라 소소도 셰럽기에 여말에서 소소도 지에 셰럽기 그래서 제가 소소도 셰럽기 사동 스니바 말이스 사동원의 말이스 사동도 제스트 봐 사동 자와시です still not 사동 말이스 똑같은 거죠.
No, the doubt that's being raised or the qualm, just to go over it again, or in simpler ways, just to recognize that Tsongkhapa is making the major point that there's an order here. First, serenity needs to be attained, then insight. But then what about, so does that mean that, well, you can't have penetrating insight and analytical wisdom, penetrating analytical wisdom without first having achieved serenity? So the answer is no. The reply is no. You can have that kind of penetrating wisdom. Yes, you can have penetrating wisdom, or analytical wisdom, but it's not the actual, the definitionally, it wouldn't be identified as actually fitting the definition of insight. So it's sort of just like a approximate insight, but not the actual vipassana or insight that's talked about in the sutras.
오빠, 더 빨리 보라.
This questions come as you read through these explanations. So this is like, so Tsongkhapa himself is bringing up the question in his own text.
Okay.
That's a clarifying question, Geshe-la. And it talks about that through rational analysis, say on impermanence or selflessness, one can gain like mental transformation, right? In the sense of like, is this in the sense of having different, like generating different mental factors, right? Or like maybe you have some experience of like less attachment, less aversion, right? You're starting to generate like a clearer view of the reality, but it's still not like this more exalted transformation that's getting called vipassana, right? Or that constitutes like insight. So like, what is the, like that it's not a significant enough mental transformation, right? That like attaining a pliancy is like a major transformation, would you say? Or kind of like it's seeding this ground that there is mental transformation, but what's lacking is one way to ask the question, maybe.
이게 차단 전달이 이게 중국어 뭐라 디바라기지. 그걸 때서 그 concentration 당모스라 당구쇼. 때서 남의 중국. 이게 point 이게 되게라. 그 저도 어디 가요?
저들에게는 이 강화 가래 송도서나 신의 매나양 아니 돈이 또 비셔게 용기레스 아니
돈이 또 그랬어.
이거 용어 끼기레스 다 보이간다 따기메로 다 mental transformation lab shadows the 이거 용어 잡으시요 다이 so 이 겨워 줘야 이 간에스 겨워 줘기도 겨워 줘던 간데레스 아니 이 사톤선이 프라메나 아니 가래 창용 말해
야, 저거 야구래.
good
다
question
당기 저거 도관일이 되는
there was two questions that came out actually.
당기는 도관일이 찍기 이 되게라서 신림파도봐라 지금도 신림파도방이 가사라 소소도 비 쉐랍라 제비로도 저희는 제대로劳动원리 말했어 직세 직도와도 직세 야 신림파도봐라 신림다劳动파도봐라 돈이 열어서 지금씩 될래서 돈이 열어 이거 맞지 제가 열었어 돈이 떠버려 이집이 돈이 떠버렸어 보다 돈이 떠버려 이집이 가사디라 신뢰의 활동도 예봐도 차진 상호 말해 모두 조금 말해 이내야 신뢰의 활동 신뢰 활동 말라 돈이 돈이나 제대로 돈이 또 가사디 돈만이는 그 돈만이 다 안다생기게 살아 고알레나요 그 돈이 또 로직이 돈이 또 버티기 가자 가자 촉촉 쇼산 삼로 믹 진레가라 제시도 고백하라 이주 녀하게 이나야 콜라 신뢰의 활동 매주가라 지 돈이 또 버티기 가자 미발로 유료네 그러나 인생은 님부시 무슨이 유저라 신뢰의 활동 매배 원기 매배 강의지 원기 그 돈이 더 불러지기 가서 당신다 유목이 자와 당신 여자시다 되게 상말라 가자 되게 상마 그 한다 뒤치도 말 가자 무슨이 가서 가서 마서나 무추니 가서 녀바 치수 뭐 슝슝 땅 통마 당시 되자실 때뭐 슝슝 영제 하듯이나 기내다 하고 세지 비신다 하고 매비기 뭐 되게 돈이 또고요 돈이 또고 얘나야 돈이 또로 얘나 로티기 뉴 로티라 유 동반이 또바디 그 차지지 상요데 돈이 또 로티라 돈이 또 로티라 같이 중화도 그외 원기 이 원기 봐 아니 중화的고백의 같이 주의치다 아니 스테이지비 돈이 유미벌라 돈이 또 로티라 스테이지도 요인의 뉴버티 시내 스테이지비 띵이 뉴버티 마땅한 원기 뉴몰라 가자 기초도 마땅
And again, shine maybe Tony to bello di che na I gyogi nyongo ti grese, ma some gyo jo grese, gyo ganes to do.
일당이 라이바 이 가르쳐나 자꾸 통수라 들리래 얘들이 삽삽 축성 충성을 유지를 유어도 쇼타임도 유그래 이게 들어와 테스트 주어 유그래 어차피 오 돈이도 물론 유버 지기 원낭술을 들으래 전혀 들으래 셔서 무변이도 신고하라 무변이도 신고가 동반이 유니즈 거시고 되게 그게 테스트 튀기래 갈라가서 튀기래 이내 그게 가자 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 유모라 가자 무치를 봐 유모 슉도 내지 슉슉으로 따라라 그 유버 당고
Then there's those two questions like Tsongkhapa raised here was first of all, which comes first? Or can you have Vipassana without shamatha? The answer is no. You have to have shamatha first. But then the second question, so then can you not have the wisdom that realizes emptiness without shamatha? The answer is no. You can have the wisdom realizing emptiness without a shamatha. The only problem is that it's not going to be continuous. You're not going to be able to hold it in mind continuously. So of course, by having the wisdom, this analytical insight or wisdom that realizes emptiness, then you do, what changes in your mind is yes, it does benefit you, certainly. You see that the way things appear is not in accord with how they exist. Right, so that will change your perception, but only for short moments of time. Yeah, for sure.
비질리네 돼 빠르면 시장 빠르면 시들어도 바바바 대통마 로 무칠 바바바 대통
Right, so it's sort of like a flickering lamp or flickering light. It's not like a light that's just on, illuminating the whole space for a long period. It's just like a flicker. So that kind of just instantaneous clash of wisdom. So that's not powerful enough. So that that changes you. It does change your mind, but it's not powerful enough to really get at the root of the afflictions, the self-grasping ignorance, and to really overcome attachment, aversion, and ignorance. For that you need the continuity of the serenity and the insight, the actual vipassana. I mean, when I say insight, the actual insight or vipassana, and because when you don't have those, then you have the afflictions of excitement and lethargy that continuously will come and interrupt the wisdom. They keep coming up. So until you can actually overcome those or suppress those, then the wisdom will be powerful enough to genuinely, overcome the afflictions, to remove the afflictions.
나가 본다 선하고를 빼는 나고기를 본다 스트리트 라이트에서 나고나야 스트리트 라이트에서 마르스 신의 핑민다 스트리트 라이트에서 로 바바바 되고도 나가야고 통과는 로 바바바 되고 마도 이제 바스 시시데시나 나가야 통통마라 바스 버스 돈이 또바디 네가 친구래 배 친구야 돈이 또바다 마도 이제 오프 또바디 배시가 네가 시기래 이내고 로드 마스나 디다 게타기 나오지도 디치 배치 니 배치자 배치지 배니버들 니 찬디라 배치 돈이 또바디 배예 이내 신을 하고 면은 팽이 말해 배다 미지래 티세노 요와시자 요와 핸들 요와야 보면은 그 티세노부에는 티디 배제당어 사실 유사 핸들 야 보면은 그 가르쳐 주고 또 주고 야고 또 원래 신도는 무슨 핸들 야 보고 티세노부 코레 지는 게 티디 시미에 신도도 배웠다 신도도 배라 핸들 야 보고는 야 세노 보면은 세노보 핸들 주사야 보이나 아니 신도도 뭐 두고 가서 또 두고로 emptiness.
So it's this is like what we can see two examples. One, like we were saying before with the light, if you're trying to go somewhere and it's dark at night and the street light is just kind of coming on for a split second and going off again and coming on for a second and going off again, then it won't help. You won't be able to see the path and street and go anywhere. So you need to have a light that stays on continuously. Then that's one example. Another example is like if you're trying to say cut down a tree, or cut some wood, right? To cut some wood, you need a sharp blade or a sharp saw. So that's like the wisdom. Of course, it's beneficial to have even just a moment, a flash of wisdom, realizing emptiness. That does have power. That is beneficial. But if you just have, but that's like a sharp saw blade. You just have this sharp saw blade, but you don't have a good handle to actually use the saw, to actually hold on to it. So then you won't be able to cut the tree. So you need to have both a good handle as well as a sharp blade. But between like, realizing emptiness and not having a realization of emptiness, of course, it's more valuable. It's valuable to have the realization of emptiness. It's very powerful. So.
Yeah. Mr. John, now last time you said you have some question, sir.
Yeah. I mean, if you forgive me, this is seems to be the main. I guess my microphone is on. Yeah. Okay. So you can hear me. All right. So the main question would be, if nothing, in other words, according to the Buddhist concept, the Buddha said in the Heart Sutra and the Dharma Sutra that there's no self that continues, the anatman or anatta. You don't have a self that continues. There's only karma that continues. So the point is that it seems to me there's a paradox in that these people that do that's first of all this is contradicted by the Bartle Thodol, because the Bartle Thodol, all it does is talk about what happens after you die. You're going to be reborn, and if you had a good life, you're going to be reborn in I mean, if you accumulated merit, you're going to be reborn in favorable circumstances and being able to study the Dharma. If you lived a bad life, you could reincarnate in the hell worlds. However, if you don't have a self, a real self that's going on, it's like the candle lighting another flame of another candle. I mean, so someone like, let's say, we don't have to get into any names, but someone like, let's say, that has a position of immense power politically in the world and is creating a lot of suffering for a lot of people. And in other words, he's creating a lot of negative karma. When he continues in the next life, he's not going to continue in the next life because there's no suffering. So how does the law of karma apply to somebody who's committing bad or heinous deeds in this life if there's no self, no entity that's going to reap let's say that's going to experience the serious, the consequences.
Problem. Really confused.
Yeah, I'm not confused. It's because it states this clearly. I mean, let's say you commit a lot of crimes in this life, right?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, so then you go on to the next life. There's no self that continues. So how?
I understood.
So basically, you've led this life and you've done whatever you wanted. You made a lot of money and you've let's say taken a lot of drugs and you've committed heinous acts. Let's say like Jeffrey Epstein. Everybody knows about Jeffrey Epstein. And then so who's do you actually pay for that in the next life? If you don't have a self, how do you pay for it in the next life?
Okay, sir. So your point question, maybe if I understand you, wait, answer me. Give me 1 minute. Continue that manner and let you know because I have to carry you to
What? So in other words, it's
Wait, wait.
like you're living your life with a get out of jail free card, they say. If you ever play Monopoly, I don't know if they play Monopoly and the llamas play Monopoly, but that's like a get out of jail free card. Do whatever you want in this life, and next life, don't worry about it because you don't have a self that's going to pay.
Yeah, I answer, sir. Your question, I answer.
So
Even
how do you answer that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, so let me answer. Even I don't have how to, even I don't have much knowledge of English, but I can understand your question roughly from you. I can understand some read of your question. Read. I can read. But 저들이 이 산다 다메시 남주 타니도 메시 뭐 말하지. 산다 남주시는 다메시 저거 산다 kuid이라 오라 레전드 없이. 남주시는 다메고 수니티 다메 수니시도 동반이세도 다메시 남주 다다 강다 나서도 켜메 코메 가사메 레지데메 싸우니시 뭐 말아. 타니 메시 이거 예봐. 정말 있어 봐. 안다디 메스 다음에 동반이 세시도 가사가 다음에 치고 다음에서 메스디 랑왕의 다음에 랑윈이 주 다음에 유전이 주 다음에 시고 각자기 전당 오마 때문에 시글라 카요 말다 혼조 시기요라 시 남베시기 시 타니라 필로소비나라 저게 다음에 가사기 다음에 치기 다음에 세요라다 공부하면 동바우 공부 동바우 가사 동바우 동바시 식기게 남들 뭐마디 세우 메사 타니 식모동 여러 페이스 서비스 이치부터 아니 컨퓨즈 거기서 개와도 통과가 지금 레기의 개와 아마 치마 산제고가 나 산제고 도이 신뢰시 있어 지네 다음에 감사하면 시험에서 가리는 공부가 그니 개와 싸우니냐 그 진비의 징조 진비의 징조 때다 땜바 이 대회를 하고 라운드 자
Then, so the phrase when the Buddhist teachings or in Buddhism, when they say selfless or selflessness, then they're not, it doesn't mean that conventionally there is no self. The meaning of that term selfless is not that you don't exist, I don't exist, all of us are the place we're in doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that things exist conventionally. So the self, it doesn't mean the self doesn't exist conventionally. So we hear the phrase selfless or empty, but that phrase or that term means that the self, there doesn't exist a independent self. It doesn't exist a self which is established within its own being independently. So that's the self that's being negated. So of course it's difficult when we see all these texts that sort of just, they have the terminology there, the five aggregates are empty, the self is, selfless as a person, selfless as a phenomena, selfless, this term is there. But, and so when we just kind of see it without, knowing kind of the background and just seeing those phrases, then yes, of course, it seems like it's contradictory. Like, well, in one place, the Buddha talks about cause and effect of karma, and the other place he's saying the selflessness. So it does seem like it's contradictory. But actually, when you understand this thing which we call the object to be negated, the object to be negated you have to understand where to combine that with the other terms that you're seeing in the text. And then once you understand that, then you see that they actually support each other. The understanding of selflessness supports the understanding of karma, and the understanding of karma supports the understanding of selflessness. They help each other.
in another way, furthermore, independence would be made to scientific super telaya, Yichibu Maima, Taxi Chebaina. Chebaina, Rawan Dame, Rawan Pumbume, Rawan any Time, say to Taxi Chebaina, Taxi Kazi Cheban, same so. What I did Russia the Jumzi, same so. Carisano, Rawan Dame. Rawan Pumis, Rawan maybe Jimmy has. 电击电话就当现实，电击了多少？电击可啥？电击多少？电别让心，电别让心，电的特别让心，不送啥？ 아니 라왕 라왕 다음에 라왕 봐 스테레스 된다 미니기로 동반이 된다 니로 아 굉장히 좋아 인지 장원 지금 신인사 아니 라왕의 주의 취민도 라왕의 취민도 대바주의 취민도 알아 대바주의 민도 라왕의 주의 민도 라왕의 생기 주의 민도 아 뭐들이 그래서 인지 장원 지금 신도 인지 인지 가서 가서 인지 장원 좀 많이 아 라왕 좀 더 사용 봐 뒤지래 라왕의 주바이나 电视电话剧上是一部用心嘛，我听听的，不是听说的，这个 selflessness 那个东北来，东北 emptiness 还是吧，坚定性的婚姻，不是听说的，婚姻真的保持起对吧？我按照这里养不来些了，当然，不是这个有听的，天天你把的他们用的了，电视电话剧上是一部的他们用的了，是吧？这里边看了我呢，那边去了，去了四亿那个，哎，可是去了想把那个。你面对的东北你写过吗？的这几条就要牺牲来了，是吧？遇到见了对吧？偏心对吧？偏心对吧？遇到见了对吧？那你明大不了对吧？明天下不了对吧？因为你知道，天对太松散对吧？也不松散，那你让我出发面，遇见你出发面都是，但不出发面都是，让你谁出发面都是，我的团队过去行为，什么时候接不上的球呢？徐老师都说。
So that was one thing. The second thing to note is that the more you analyze, we're saying that there's no independent self. There's no self that has its sort of is established by way of some kind of intrinsic character, a character that it just subsists on its own. So that is actually kind of simple to understand, and the more you think about it, the clearer and clearer it becomes. Why? Because the reason for that, the reason that proves that, is the fact that things are dependent or contingent and interconnected or interrelated. So because things are dependent and interconnected, then they cannot be established by way of their own nature. So those things contradict each other. But by understanding how things are contingent or dependently originated, dependently established, then we can see that they're therefore empty of independence. Being empty of independence establishes that they can or allows them to arise in dependence on other things, independence on causes and conditions, independence on, for instance, mutual support, things mutually depending on each other, as well as being dependent on kind of a designation or a name, being dependent on naming conventions. So that's how things are established or exist, by depending on other things, being contingent on other things. So therefore, they don't have some kind of intrinsic or independent nature.
Well, I mean,
Sir, 1 minute, Mr. John, 1 minute, please. Let me one sentence, then we can stop. 대송자라, therefore, 예, dire. 아니네, 나랑서 쓰다. 나랑서 남기도 수도수도라. 그러나 내 삼로나라. 내 삼로나 쇼가 미단 고다만이면다. 나 삼로나 나 스코르도. 나 기구도, 나 칼라사고도, 나 고도고도, 나 지게지시, 나 들이 차시디. 와, 나 산이디시, 나 레가티시스, 나 삼로나 나 삼로 샤기도. 이 삼로도 누자 말해. 나 삼로 콘디래. 와, 시티도 남시 여바 티스도 나 삼로도 이해 말해. 이 누가 말해? 네게 말해. 이는 나라서 나 지시우 나 니스 삼로 나 코와 티스 나게 랑신디. 나 모두 근데 나는 그잖아. 인디베드 말아서 살고. 티셔츠 여러분. 딱히 지고 말. 삼로를 곰자니. 나 삼로도 이해이니. 나 삼로 tel라. 나 코디고 나게 랑신. 나 모두 근데 샤. 소소라 차다셔봐. 다시 셔봐이나. 아, 랑문이 듣는 말. 아, 덴버주도 말다. 아, 마디오 랑왕은 말다. 뭐 되게 같이 샤기요. 이 샤기 자자도 샤기요. 샤워 수술하고 오면 당신 직원을 나 examine meditation analyze meditation 직원 봐라 샤기요를 샤워 수술이 되게 가지 이거만 심바지 기고 심바지 링고 심발로 난지로 지키고 온디 삼로 지난 신기 나디 지고마다 지난 신기 미셰지 벨로사 되다 존 기수 통화했다라 이기수 통화했다라 그냥 통화했다라 코데도 코파게도 코케지시도 코칼라사도 통화지 이래서 코코 미시수 통화했네야 야 뭐디 가리스는 뭐 오브젝트 가리스는 인디펜던트 로사 돼 인디펜던트 죠 인디펜던트 나온 주게 tempo 주게 봐 다도 주게 맞아 뭐든지 낭시 시대 낭시 시대 쓰고 기고 뭐 딜로 딜로今天在加拿去现在看的看通话的技能信息，技能信息我难过。去加拿大我不他们写了他们的通话的技能系统通过。通信先把也技能系给我写不这边，我地路也弄这个是。当时是这个，当时样电视是弄这个。
But just one more thing, I wanted to say is we don't really have to analyze that deeply. Here, the exercise is to observe your own experience and the experience of when you're just thinking about yourself. So, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I want to eat. So I'm eating, I'm walking, I'm thinking. All these thoughts in relation to ourselves. Those aren't bad, right? Those are fine. There's nothing bad about those. But just observe. What is it? What is the sense? How does it appear in your mind when you're thinking, I'm sitting here, or I'm talking, or I'm eating? Well, there's the thought of I, the appearance of an I, or the experience of an I. And the way it's experienced is as though it is somehow independent without being contingent on others. It feels like it's independent, the way the I appears or is felt when we think of it, when we think of ourselves. Likewise, when we see another person, and you see Lozong Dunya sitting there and the other people in the room sitting there, it feels like it appears as though, or it seems as though they are independent without being contingent on other things, that they are somehow self-existent. And so there's that perception, and then after that perception, then comes a cognitive grasping, yeah.
Grasping mind on grasp.
So the grasping at it, that's what we mean by self-grasping ignorance. When there's the experience or we perceive a person, it's not just people actually, all the things around us, the chairs, the tables, the TVs, the screens, all these things, they are also appearing, or we perceive them as though they are independent. And then if we then go on after and grasp them and have an actual an apprehension or a cognition of them being that way, that's what we mean by self-grasping ignorance, or grasping at things as true. So this is something for us to just kind of experience, to observe in your own meditation, to observe how things are appearing. So we got a discussion of emptiness a bit today. So let's just try and finish the chapter, or this section, I should say, of the outline. There's not too much left.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just keep reading. Where were we?
We're at the beginning of the last paragraph, the discerning.
Yeah. Enchila Hong said,
Last one.
yeah, if you want.
All right.
Oh, it's like
Discerning wisdom becomes insight when, without focusing on a single object, it can generate pliancy through the power of analysis. So, generating pliancy by setting your attention on a single object of meditation, even if the object is emptiness, is nothing more than a way to achieve serenity. That alone does not count as attaining insight. Why? If you thus first seek an understanding of selflessness, analyzing its meaning again and again. It would be impossible to achieve serenity on the basis of this analysis, since you have not previously achieved serenity. If you do stabilizing meditation, can you move up the screen?
This should be the next
Without, without analysis, you will achieve serenity on that basis. However, as there is no way to sustain insight except by sustaining serenity, you have to seek insight later. Hence, this does not fall outside the parent in which, having previously sought serenity, you cultivate insight based on it. Accordingly, the way insight develops is that discerning analytical meditation generate pliancy. If this were not so, there would not be the slightest good reason to seek serenity first and then cultivate insight based on it. Failing to do these meditation in this order is quite inappropriate because the sutra unraveling the intended meaning state that in a passage cited above, that you cultivate insight on the basis of having attained serenity. Also, the order of meditative stabilization and wisdom among the six perfections, of which it is said that the later develop based on the former, as well as the sequence in which training in higher wisdom is based on training in higher concentration, are in agreement with the sequence in which, having previously cultivated serenity, you later cultivate insight. Asanga Bodhisattva levels cited earlier, and his Shravaka levels, Shravaka Bhumi, indicate that insight is cultivated on the basis of meditative serenity. Also, Bhava Viveka, Hearts of the Middle Way, Mahiyamaka Hridaya, Santidevas engaging in the Bodhisattva deeds, Kamalasila's 3 stages of medication, Chanakirti, and Ratnakarasanti, all state that you cultivate insight after previously seeking serenity. Some Indian masters claim that without seeking serenity separately, you generate insight from the outset through analysis by discerning wisdom. Since this view contradicts the text of the great trailblazers, the wise deem it to be untrustworthy. There is a sequence in which you newly develop serenity and insight for the first time. Later, the sequence is indefinite, as you may cultivate serenity after previously cultivating insight. Huam, Asanga's Compendium of Knowledge states, some attain insight, but do not attain serenity. They strive for serenity on the basis of insight. How do you account for this? Reply, this means that they have not attained the serenity of the actual first meditative stabilization or beyond. It does not preclude their having attained the serenity which is included in the access to the first meditative stabilization. Also, once you have perceptual knowledge of the fourth truth, you can establish on that basis the serenity of the actual first meditative stabilization and the higher meditative stabilizations. For Asanga levels of yogic deeds, Yogacharya Bhumi says, moreover, you can accurately note the reality of the truth from suffering to the path without having attained the first meditative stabilization, etc. As soon as this knowledge of the truth occurs, you stabilize your mind and do not analyze phenomena. Based on this higher wisdom, you pursue the practice of higher state of consciousness. In general, for the sake of comprehensive terminology, the 9 mental states are called meditative serenity, and the fourfold analysis is called insight. However, you must apply the term actual serenity and actual insight, as will be explained after the generation of pliancy.
Okay, thank you, position. The text almost the English text, yeah, it's almost computer. Some
Oh, yeah, I forgot to
layout that is
share. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, position. So, okay, that anyway, the doctor don't. The table of Saswa. Monty, Shilani, Nizuti. That next time, was the two me see you, man. You want to watch it and not some show. It was saying loud.
So now we've gotten through that section. If anyone still has one question, we can take one last question, and if not, we'll stop the class here today.
I do have a question.
Oh, there's one question here.
Yeshua, I feel like I've seen that I have like 1,000 selves in me, 1,000 eyes, and some are when I'm hungry, I identify with my hunger. If I see a pretty woman, I identify with the pretty woman. If it's bad weather, I feel a certain way. But I do sometimes feel that there's something higher above that watches those parts. I see my hunger, but I don't identify with it. I'm not taken by it. Or I maybe see an aversion or a desire, but I'm not taken by it. How do I make that part stronger? Is it just practice? Is it just maybe many years of practice, maybe many lifetimes of practicing, of observing, of witnessing, and not always being identified or taken by my body or taken by desires?
Chedong dagi wadzimba mambo years. Chedong da dag mambo years la ri doa. The dag years la nge go adila ani dagi wadzimba da wachi go songa.
Yeah.
The ko tani shingi mando ya bo. Ni dag mambo years, na mambo years. Kana bumo thongwa dang ani bumo thongwe mi she da bumo thongwa di ani dadu zimba years. Dag imba nangwa years. Yamana kala la sanin toyena ani delayang ani dadu zimba years. Chechang dagi wa nangwa da wachi pache ingi de sami. Ani chechang ina yang samsang ani kabre tezo la mise gi kari sobre that the gari identify sana goso identify mare identify with server identify with sana ding nine la is yo ding nine
dagi was about dingy.
dagi was the trouble chesam identify with sana dagi was the trouble or chesam samsam dagi was the yongi mindus samsam the ngods into budget 통화 to budget in a young dagi was the yongi mindus the dagi was the mayong with the yabo yugi is the garsore that the monks the nangshin mawa the mambo sorry the nangshin mutene yongde years ani nyongwa the kanes yongge is mutene nyamlan je gore be kanes yongge is the mambo ring to nyamlan je na the nangshin mambo yongge be is kososo
일단 가서 낭비시는 되게 인민주 시죠. 좋아. 지난주 말도 간에 주제네. 그것도 로로. 나라 세베로 좋아. 나라 세베로다. 다도 생들로 이때 가가. 단단 가서 낭비시는 빵세는 낭림을 빵으로 놓는 거래. 진실로 흘러래. 봐. 루트원 이방으로. 이매우서 솔로 당부지 못 쳐가시. 나다마 좀 원실 가지고 봐. 당신 원심보다 당부 당신 원심다 같이 생고 있으나 다 잠시 가서 소소 삼는 도시 한 소소랑 삼는 나가서 뭐 해야 되죠. 나디 뭐디 간데스난 제가 원심은 나디랑 시디 간데스 아, 이 소소다 능주다 니주야 제바시 삼는 능주다 니주 말라 말아서서 라니라 능주다 니주 간데스 제바시 니 소소 삼는 거 미先제바 제가 그나 소소 유시다 차과도 나와 가르치기네 차과도 나와 유 가르치기네 이 차고는 차고 치우십니다. 차고의 유의가 낭수가 내수도 같아요. 나오는 기회가 낭수 내수 같아요. 내가 니가 걸 제바쳐. 제바체나 땡땡거라 아니 낭수 되는 낭수 내수 뭐만 들리듯이 사람들이 뭐 고아라 빠져도 라파 고아라 빠시 이제 잘했어요. 주마다비 고아라 아 뭐지 디스테르 센터나 아니 센터 사실 nem바를 샤아서 이질이죠. 준비 있어야 돼. 오늘 nem바를 샤디 nem바를 샤아서 좋아. 뭐다 둘은 남배들이 제바치 들어. 제바치스입니다. 세리 다듯이 시부치다. 이제 빨리 니즈 관리지 걸라. 해봐 지금 비행 맞죠? 시계랍을 trouxe você podia subir 시계랍 que não me ajuda 시계랍 뭐 집다 쏘디 이제 산다 고랑 지워지다 지 상어지다 좋아요 뒤에 나기 was below the 싸워 할래고 다스 below 지워 정보 난지를 난지로 캐 나이 was 정보 나시 달라시 다기 디시고 그래서 뭐지 뭐래라 저기야 지진이 되게 되죠 뒤에 디백해서 지치 이바데라 미기 쉐바다 나이 쉐바는 쉐바라 다도 주바다 라문 쉐바 난그래 얘네 미기 쉐베가 다 단식이 말해 단식으로 쏘 타오르 이기 쉐바 나고 두번 이게 덮셔 성샤다데 단식으로 쏘고 이기 쉐바래 미기 쉐바 말은 나이 쉐바 오비 쉐바가 알아 다도 주바 난그래 라문 주바 난그래 라왕 주바 난그래 이네 진리 니바디 요마 왕셰 쏘디 이셰 당시로도 낭로로 이기 쉐바 나와요. 두번 이게 남시 낭로로. 어디다 들어가.
So then I can just say kind of an essential point about this question. It really takes a lot of reading and study of text to understand it. But the first thing is to recognize that there's a difference between the self-grasping mind and then a mind where the self just appears. So just or is experienced. So just experiencing the self versus grasping at a self are two different things. But here, when we're talking about the self-grasping, then the way to identify that and what to do about it. So when we talk about what we want to abandon for spiritual practice, for our spiritual progress, we want to abandon the self-grasping. So the self-grasping we understand by checking in our own experience and seeing how do I appear, but how do I really exist? Comparing, analyzing, how do I appear, or how do I feel myself to exist? How do I seem to exist versus how do I actually exist? So check in with your own experience, observing your own experience, and when different things arise, like this attachment or different emotions and different afflictions arise, then check, okay, well, how am I experiencing it? How is the I, experienced, and how does it actually exist? And when you keep doing this analysis and you're checking, then eventually you'll come to see that there is a difference, that the way I'm appearing to exist to myself is different from the way I actually exist. And then you'll be able to start to see that the way then that things exist is like an illusion. Things are sort of illusory, and this then will give you confidence that what the Buddha taught was actually true, that the Buddha's teaching is correct, is true. So then
이직세. 니바디 맞은 게 이게 신다지 나오기 샤. 니바 신다 니바. 당기 전부제는 샤. 쇠는 줄라. 니바들라. 이제 제바 있나로. 단지로디스.就是我觉得记得能就你这个我觉得记得那提个东西咱们到了火拼这些到了这些那提从咱们到火来完呢打了这哇打了这我的塞路上路呀我这么个出飞的讲些出飞的没现出的路呢不差这个了生活地干那个了飞的去的上路了出零嘛轻易的那个了轻易的干了슈 마트그로 필터 미신 슈가고 말와 필터 미신 슈루로 슈레스나 슈가고 말 쟁이 가그로 똑같이 가그로 필터 가 슈상만에 되나 시기 다그니즈 다메베니즈 낭주니즈 제와지 세시 단세 세와도 슈치지 짱사고 치세치도 슈치
when you keep making this analysis of the perception versus the reality, then you'll start to see what we mean by selflessness. What is the meaning of selflessness? That will become clear. And then the actual, the appearance of the self, the actual self that as it appears, will become clear as well. So it's just like filtering water. When you filter, you have water that's very dirty and has a lot of pollutants, and then you put it through a filter, then the pollutants get caught by the filter. The water still comes out. So you catch the pollutants, but there's still the pure water there that will come out. So that becomes clearer. The water becomes purer. So then this is kind of how your experience of yourself will become purer and cleared of the self-grasping ignorance. And Geshe-la also mentioned that, of course, we have the 5 sensory consciousnesses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. And those also, we do grasp those as being, have self-grasping of those as well. But the actual self-grasping mind is a mental consciousness. It's not part of the senses, the mental consciousness.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think, then I think today we will stop here, right? Maybe 1 hour now, I think. Right? Today. I think it's enough. From my end.
All right, thank you.
Can we do a dedication or
Yeah. Oh. 예와디 교구 선남이지 초소시 선남이지 레죠 담바군이 잡아쇼 자주심 조로 정말 예번나 기주시 예와 냠바면 원래 권도 배워쇼 돈이 다워를 정말 예번나 기주시 예와 냠바면 원래 권도 배워쇼 야야 디치제 아니 이 권도 디시 되어서 대응아 자처럼 디시 되겠어 근데 남산 요당 내니다我现在三明嘛，或者是我了，这三明嘛是吧？如了，现在没有控制变木，都控制什么的了，没得当来了，现在来了，控制什么没得当来了，差了不了。怎么控制现在三明嘛嘞？马上，管到现在变木或者是控制你们属于公司了，控制到表演了。
제말 계속되고 나나
呀，如了开始接了，现在马上或者现在变木或者是。
그래서 나 산님의 쇼바 샴바지야.
알레요. 그러면 빠사 고도시나 어디 시우샤는 빼버시고 내가 좀 먼저 틀리냐요. 이 어디 됐어. 제 님마보다 내가 틀리래. 야보다 진짜 왜 파로 야사 하고 싶어 내가 좋아. 이 어디 됐어. 지기에 애니데니 하나 계속 걔네들가 미치고 말이지. 뉴욕을 혹시 같이 뉴욕을 좀 되게 같이 온라인 같이 삼명하고 답디오미도 갈라스 고정. 사실 번에 지나 야보도 같이 된 삼도 되죠. 빠사에는 빼먹어도 지나 디에스 고도 신다든데 디에스 같이 도나 굉장히 요같이 그냥 주주니까 주주들이 야고 따라 되고 같이 우리 남미 총수다 이게 하면 이 인지미 좋았다고 하면 미 같이 디에스 그래서 레와 제게다 섬주들이
So Geshe-la is just saying that some people had asked about if the day of the classes could be shifted to make it, I guess, so they could attend if they're not able to come on Tuesdays. But I said we'll just talk about it later because there's so many people who have different schedules, so it's kind of hard to find one that works for everybody. But we'll talk about it. Maybe if you're part of one of the WhatsApp group, you can send a message if you want. If it's better for you to change the date, that would be helpful to know. So if you want to do that.
Yeah. 就是第的安全嘛，remind 起来不要，上边呢，你们经营 remind class，我是不能 remind 起来，或者呢，계속知道，经营呢。
And then maybe we can find someone like a volunteer to send out a reminder message the day before the classes meet, just so everyone gets a reminder. And maybe would anyone like to volunteer to do that? If you just ask now, you can raise your hand or not. We can check in the group later.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
谢谢，上网比较让我good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
谢谢，